We pour out our praise, it's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only.
Good morning, boys and girls, ladies, gentlemen, children of all ages, whatever else you're supposed to say. Make sure that you take a minute, grab a bulletin if you haven't grabbed one already. There's a lot of info inside of here. There's an insert from the Campus Crusade couple, Nicholas and Katie. They're going to talk a little bit later. But make sure that you take notice. Easter cantata. Was anybody there for Easter cantata singing? Oh, come on. Nobody from second service? Who was? Carol was? Thank you, Carol. Where's Carol at? Straight. Oh, she's... Carol, thank you for going to the Easter cantata practice. For the rest of you, I've heard you sing. You better get in there. That's just a joke, but it's kind of a serious joke. The other thing is, I can only imagine the movie that the church is going to. What's the date on that? March 17. I don't think it's in here, but we'll get it in there. Make sure there's a sign up back in there, and then I'm sure that there's one under the website events tab. Yes, it says right here, events tab. It would help if the pastor read the bulletin, huh? Easter egg hunt on Easter. So in between the services on Easter Sunday, we're going to arrange so that your kiddos can have 37 seconds of sheer bliss, and then eat a bunch of candy, and then come into the service and have an hour of pure terror for everybody else in here. That's about it. Why don't we stand up, shake hands, say good morning to those around us, and we'll get going.
Good morning. Welcome to First Reformed Church. Before we get into worship, I want to read a little bit of passage out of Ephesians 4:2. It says, "Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all." So as we're singing, as we're going throughout the service, just be in remembrance of that we are the body that Paul is talking about in this text, that we are the body and that we are connected to that one Spirit. And because of that, we should be called to live humble lives, gentle lives, patient lives, bearing with one another, and loving one another because Christ loved us. So let's be mindful of that as we sing our songs, as we're listening to the message. Let that be our prayer.
The power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger. The King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing your light, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos? Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Sing it out. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. I come in simplicity, longing for purity, to worship you in spirit and truth, only you. Lord, strip it all away, till only you remain. 'Cause I'm coming back to my first love, only you. 'Cause you're the reason I sing, the reason I sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you. To you, the perfect one, to worship you in spirit and truth, only you. Give me a childlike heart, lead me to where you are, 'cause I'm coming back to my first love, only you. You're the reason I sing, the reason I sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you. And forever I'll sing, forever I'll sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you. How I love you. How I love you. How I love you. My first love. How I love you. How I love you. How I love you. My first love. 'Cause you're the reason I sing, the reason I sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you. And forever I'll sing, forever I'll sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest fame, but only lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. When darkness veils, when darkness veils His lovely face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. When He shall come, when He shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His His righteousness alone, for us to stand before the throne. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand.
We're going to sing that one more time. On Christ the solid rock I stand. Let that be our prayer.
On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand.
Amen. You may be seated. At this time, the children may be dismissed for children worship.
I know normally we have the offering right now, but we're going to take a time out from doing things like we always do them as usual, just to mess with y'all's mental status. And let you know, kids can go to children in worship, and then I'm going to invite Nicholas and Katie Tiff to come up, and they're going to share a little bit. You got the little insert in your bulletin if you got a bulletin. They're going to share a little bit about their ministry with Campus Crusade and how we can help support them. So I'll turn it over to them, and then we'll come back, and then I'll give you a few more instructions.
Good morning. My name is Katie Tift, and this is my husband, Nicholas. And I grew up going to First Reformed all of my childhood and semi-adult life. And my parents are Dave and Cindy Whistler. And so it's fun to be back and see lots of faces that I remember. Nicholas and I are here because we are joining staff full-time with Cru, the U.S. Ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ International. We were involved in Cru as students at the University of South Dakota, and we graduated in 2015. For the last 2 years, I've been a second grade teacher at Laura Wilder Elementary, and Nicholas has been an intern with Cru. And throughout our work in the classroom and on the college campus, we have decided to follow God's call on our lives into full-time ministry with Cru. And so in Cru, we are trusting God to reach the 150 million college students of the world with the message of Christ. Every student on every campus.
There's a worldwide phenomenon that happens every 1.3 seconds, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Every 1.3 seconds, someone on the planet receives Christ through the worldwide outreach of Cru. And Katie and I are excited to enter into that mission with Cru, and we'd love to have you join us. A couple weeks ago, we were here at First Reformed, and Pastor Ken preached on Luke 10. And in verse 2, Jesus says, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest that he would send out laborers into his harvest." And Katie and I are excited to do just that. The founder of Campus Crusade, Bill Bright, said that if we reach the campus today, we can reach the world tomorrow. And I've seen glimpses of that in my own ministry, seeing students being reached on the campus and being sent out into their communities after they graduate. And I met a girl named Kay Lynn 2 years ago at USD. She was this shy girl who was apprehensive about getting involved in Cru. But one night, she attended a Cru meeting, and after the meeting, she found herself sitting across the table from a Cru staff member named Dusty. And Dusty began sharing the gospel with her, and Kaylin started opening up and sharing what she was wrestling with anxiety and depression, and shared that in high school, she was told that she could never have a relationship with God because of the sin she was struggling with. Dusty continued to unpack the gospel for her and shared that Jesus came and died for all of her sins, not just some of them. And that night, Kaylin accepted Christ, and since then has been sharing with other students on her campus about the message of the gospel. And that's what Katie and I are excited to be a part of, reaching lost students on these campuses and sending them out so that they can reach other students on their campus and in their future communities and in their workplace. But we can't do it without your help. Cru has no central funds for paying salaries and ministry expenses, so like many other missions organizations, we depend on the consistent financial support of concerned individuals. And so we would love to invite you to partner with us financially, however you would like to, and we would love to meet up with you sometime and share with you more about how you can do that.
Nicholas and I have seen countless lives like Kaylin changed through our involvement in Cru, and we would and we want to be a part of reaching more lost students and introducing them to a relationship with Christ. And we would love to invite you to be a part of that mission with us. Nicholas and I will be placed in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we will be planning conferences, organizing global missions, and working with area campuses to reach those lost students on campus. In your bulletin is a connection card, as Pastor Ken mentioned, and we would love to have you fill that out and put it in the offering plate or hand it to us after the service. We'll be in the back somewhere, and you can come and find us, and we would love to talk with you more there.
Thanks, y'all. So what I will say is, how many of y'all remembered that I preached on Luke 10 a couple weeks ago? 6 of you. So awesome to them, and to bring it on back, like I told them in first service, you guys can come back anytime you want. Are maybe the choir mics on or something, Doug? Okay, I'm just going to keep talking. Part of this is, there we go, sorry. Part of all this, the really cool part, is that Katie grew up going to church here, just like many of you maybe have, and some of this is the aspect that when she grew up as a kid here, the congregation stood up, and the congregation said, yes, we will. And that's what we do every time that we have a baptism of a little kid. Not to say God's going to do something amazing with them and all their sins are washed away, but simply as a sign of the covenant that says, to our kids we will do the best, and to our church family we will be the best that we can for them. And so it comes full circle. She grows up as a little kid up into a semi-adult now. I can only say that because I am older than you, so there is more adultiness that comes later. That eventually it comes full circle from the congregation saying, yes, we want to pour into their lives, to them standing before you and say, we're going to go out into the world and we want to pour into people's lives. And there's quite a few that are college students that know that is the time in your life where you go, what am I going to be? What am I going to do? What am I going to eat for lunch? Did I miss all my classes this morning? And then somebody comes into your life and says, hey, I've been through some of those things and I care. And it changes people's lives little by little, relationship by relationship. And so any way that we can help support them, we are all for, I am all for. So if you can, I forgot. Bill, why don't the deacons come forward? I'm just going to keep on going, and why don't the deacons come forward and take this morning's offering? And then I'm just going to roll right in with the sermon. So if you are new or visiting, thank you for coming. Make sure everybody on the road takes a minute and passes down the friendship pad so that we know that you're here. Public Speaking 101. Do not chew gum while you talk. This is the order from first service, so I don't need it anymore. I'm going to turn around. You didn't see that grossness. Wipe that on the back of my pants. So if you're new with us, we are beginning a series called Return. And the point of the series Return is that we are saying to God, we want to come back. We've been out amongst the world. We've been doing things on our own. Maybe we've continued to do some of the things, but we're going to make a concerted effort to renew that relationship with Christ in this season of Lent that moves its way towards Easter. As we do that, one of the big things is to be able to say, God, I want to reorient my life. And that's what last week was. Jeremiah 6 is the passage we talked about, how he said, go out into the crossroads, to the ancient paths, and ask the people around there how to make their way back. And I gave you 4 things, kind of concentric circles, where it was, 1, you have to begin to reorient yearly, that there are times within the church that things need to change within your own life. That you, especially during Lent and Easter and Advent and Christmas, where you can specifically say, God, during this special time of your church calendar, I'm going to give of my time. I'm going to commit more. I'm going to try and reorient my life back to you. All the way down from weekly things, daily things, hourly things. So some of that is working with our small groups. beginning to find community beyond the big community in this room. Because if you just come on Sunday and you hear me and the band and stuff, or you hear Steve, and that'll be fine for a while, but eventually something will happen in your life where you need someone else, and the only people you have to turn to is me and Steve, and we can only be stretched so far. But the people to your left and to your right are the people that truly will care when it gets to that place, because if we all are in this together, through small groups, you find those relationships. You begin to foster community in a way that's different than what you have if you just show up. The other thing was, maybe that means hourly just simply reorienting your life through prayer, and not big prayers, like not big things that we have to pray in amazing, wonderful ways, but simply praying with intentionality of, God, I pray that you would use me this week. God, I pray that you would change my circumstances. God, I pray that you would help my house to sell. God, I pray that you would come back into my life like you hadn't before. I pray that I would be more receptive to what you're doing. Any number of things to continually bring yourself back to center. This week, we're going to look at Genesis chapter 3 and really kind of the first 3 chapters of Genesis as a whole to say, God, why? If week 1 was, here are some ways to reorient, going from big down to small, why would we do that? What stands in the way of that? So I'm going to pray before we get there. The words will be on the screen, but I will invite you, if you have a device that reads or the Pew Bible in front of you, feel free. We're going to look at the first 7 verses of Genesis. I invite you to pray with me. Spirit, I pray that you would come. I prayed that thousands upon thousands of years ago, when you wrote these words down through Moses, that at that point when you brought them to life, that you would bring them to life here this day, in this time, this moment. That when we hear it, we would hear it as if for the first time and understand it. I pray that just as that day that you took the dirt of the ground and spoke life into it, that brought Adam into existence, I pray that you would do that here this morning. That these words would speak life into our situations, into our circumstances, into the very nature of who we are. And above all, Lord, I pray that you would give us the ability to hear you. And not that the things that I say are of importance, but simply that you would be the one that speaks, you would be the one that teaches, and we would come along. In your name, amen. Okay, Genesis 3. You got that, Lane? It's not on there? It was on there in first service. It's gone now? Okay, it's not on there. Make sure that you turn to your Bible in Genesis 3. This is the morning of technical difficulty in second service, I think. Now, the serpent was more crafty than any of the other wild animals that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden'?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman. "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and that you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Okay, so if we kind of track along the way here, we get the beginning, there's God, and God brings forth light. He brings forth the sun and the moon and the ground, and the water comes up from the ground and waters everything. There wasn't rain yet. That doesn't come until Noah, which is kind of a crazy thing if you didn't grow up reading the Bible. It did not rain until the crazy rain comes down when he's building a boat and he says it's going to be bad, and they're like, "What's going on?" It's probably like Kishmar when he came and it snowed for the first time, and it's like, what in the world is this? it hadn't rained to that point. So water comes up from the ground. He forms Adam. He puts Adam to sleep. He gives him Eve, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. And he tells them all of this. Care for it. Eat whatever you like, except from that tree. Everything else is okay. One thing to note is, to this point in history, everybody was a vegetarian. All vegan, nothing but fruits and veggies. There were no animals had been harmed in the making of this creation story until after the fall happens. The rule is don't eat from that tree. Got it. Check. Done. So Adam and Eve go about their days naming the animals, and it says what he called it, it was, and what he called it, it was. And so these things came about, and then we get to chapter 3. Serpent comes and says, now did God really say you can't eat anything? Now is that what he said? Well, no, Eve tells you. No. He didn't say that we can't eat anything. He said we could eat, but just not that one. And don't even touch it. Oh. Well, if you touch it, you'll die? Well, now here's where things get a little blurry. The rule is, don't eat that fruit. And what happens? Ate the fruit. Pretty simple, isn't it? Okay, after they eat the fruit, out of the garden you go, you can't come back in. And eventually what happens is, I set a rule, you broke the rule, and now I have to send somebody that can not break rules. Does that sound pretty true to the gospel story? It is. It's just not a real good view. It's like, I think these are Stevens. Y'all change a lot. Those are dirty. Those are nasty. I'm going to put those back. It's like the glasses just aren't right. Now, that doesn't seem wrong, and I'm not saying that it is wrong, but what the focus on that story is God made a rule, Adam and Eve broke the rule, God had to bring somebody that follows all the rules in order to make things right. Deep down inside, that's probably what we really think, but let's look a little deeper at what goes on here. And I'll prepare you. This sermon this morning is not something that's going to have cool illustrations, but it's going to make this part of your brain, maybe this part of your brain, hurt just a little bit sometimes, because you're going to look at things differently. The serpent comes and says, now, did he say you couldn't eat anything? Well, he never said that you can't eat anything. That's ridiculous. But what he does is he opens the door just a little bit. Because Eve's response is what? No, he said we could eat, but we can't eat that and we can't touch that. Well, in chapter 2 of Genesis, God just simply says, care for these things that I've given you. Don't eat that. That's for me. The serpent gives her the opportunity to defend God. Now, there's a reason he's called the crafty one here. He gives her just enough opportunity to not simply tell him, God said we can eat whatever we want, but that one is for him. She says, no, we can eat what we want, but we don't eat that one, and we don't touch it. Suddenly, she's putting rules in place that were never, ever there. What began with God having a relationship in which is very different than the rest of creation. Creation is created in its own way, and he gets to Adam and he says, just like me you are. In my image I am making you because I want a relationship with you. And what happens is The serpent comes in and says, what if we just open the door just a little bit to awaken that thing inside of you that says, if I follow the rules, it'll be okay. If I defend God's honor, it'll be okay. Now, for some of us, we go, oh, okay, maybe that's a little different. I don't really know where you're going, Ken, to see how this really fully comes. But if you really take a step back and go, who created everything? Who is the one that is called the advocate? Not me, not you, not Adam, not Eve, not the serpent. God is God, the one that needs nobody to stand up and say, wait a minute, God's not such a bad guy. He gave us all this other food and we don't touch that one. Extra rules to protect us from doing the things wrong. The serpent begins to awaken that thing deep down inside that says, maybe I can do things better to please God. The end result is they make their way to the tree, and it says she took the fruit and saw that it was good for eating. Well, she put the rule in there that says don't touch it or you die. She broke her own rule already. Any of you that have children know that once the doors open just a little bit and it's like, well, I kind of messed up a little bit. Maybe let's just stay out all night long. Maybe that was just me. Most of you didn't do that stuff. I'm not saying that was right, but that was the logic. My gramps said, now Ken, nothing good goes on after midnight. And I'd say, I know, Gramps, that's why I wait until 3 a.m. to come home, so all the bad kids went home already. And he says, But at some point you go, well, I'm already in trouble, what's it matter? She sees the fruit that she's already said, don't touch it or it's really bad for you. God never said. Never, ever, ever said. God said, I want a relationship with you, and the way that relationship works is eat anything you want, but this one is mine. And she said, what you have, I kind of want. I think it's okay for me. The why here is her and Adam's practice no longer goes with relationship and begins to follow rules. Rules that are broken, but hey, we'll figure it out later. Rules that many of us live within. Think about, there have been plenty within the church that have something happen in their lives that's not good. Maybe it's illness, maybe it's a struggle, maybe it's something personal that you have that nobody else knows. And eventually what you do is you either call a close friend from your small group, or you call one of the pastors and you want to talk, and here's the phrase, well, we've come faithfully. We gave to the church. We helped out with that mission team. We supported the missionaries that went to Minneapolis for those college kids. Why did this happen? Let's just pause a second. We followed the rules. We did what we were supposed to, and it still didn't come out the way that we thought. The serpent's goal in the beginning was never simply to have Eve eat the fruit. It was to awaken her to the possibility that maybe you can just do things right. And maybe in doing things right, you can do things better. As we go throughout life, we begin to find those things. Things that we acquire along the way that are not necessarily bad things, but things that are not the relationship that Christ has in store for us. Not the one where God walked in the garden with them. At the end of chapter 2, it says, and they were naked and felt no shame. Chapter 3 says, Where are you? Well, God, we heard you coming, so we hid in the bushes after we covered ourselves with fig leaves because we felt ashamed. The end result is we continually cover ourselves to cover the shame that we have without ever saying anything. Do you guys watch the Olympics? Did you watch the Hunger Games, people of the Olympics? How many of you have ever seen the Hunger Games? Some 18 out of 120 of you? Okay, so that kind of hits home for some of you. How many of you would leave the house without makeup? I got you a little bit on that one. What about no hat on your head? I'm a person, like, if you don't see me, if any other day of the week, there's something on my head. Just always is. I can't remanufacture this coif every single day. It takes way too long with the blow dryer and the spray. And how many of you, how many of you have big white tube socks that you wear with sandals out in public? Yeah, I have a picture that Steve does. Now here's the thing. Steve may do that. We may make sure that we have our makeup on or clothes just right because deep down inside there's an emptiness. And we started talking about this emptiness last week. The emptiness that cries out for something more in the world, that cries out for God to restore things. Deep down inside we think, well, maybe if we follow the rules, we put on the right face, we put on the right front, that emptiness won't seem so empty. It won't hurt quite as much when we go out in public if, now kids are pulling up to church. You sit in the pew, you shut your mouth. Don't ask me for candy. You make sure that when it's time to stand up, you stand up. When it's time to sit down, you sit down. You don't beat on your sister. Don't pinch their legs. And when we get out after this, maybe we'll go to lunch if you're good. Or maybe it was simply, hey, we're going in. This is God's house. Make sure you treat it with reverence. This is a place that's very holy. Please, please, don't embarrass your mom and dad, okay? Both ways, whether it's soft and compassionate, whether it's firm and harsh like I would be, both of them get back to the root of everything's great. My kids are so wonderful. I'm so wonderful. Everything is good. Fig leaves, fig leaves, fig leaves, fig leaves, fig leaves. We're so covered in fig leaves that eventually it just looks goofy. And our fig leaves aren't physical. They're things that we put on, things that we do. I mean, I have family members that I have to not look at their pictures on Instagram because I look at it and go, you put like 4 filters on that thing. That don't even look like you anymore. But that's the outward reality of what people feel like inside. We think that if we continue to follow the rules, eventually God will say, okay, good job. And the reality is that God said, I want to walk with you in the garden and I don't want you to feel ashamed. You should not feel shame with me. Last week we ended where Jeremiah talks about these paths and that you will find rest from the things of the world amidst the scary Babylonians out there. And Jesus picks up those words in Matthew 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and you will find rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. There's a few things in there that are very, very important. If we just look at the creation story as God said, he made a rule, Adam and Eve broke the rules, so we got to continue to follow the rules until God sends somebody that followed the rules better than all of us, and then we get salvation through that. That just precipitates a cycle. You will never follow enough rules. Your kids will never be good enough. You will never be good enough. You'll never smile enough. You'll never have the right makeup, the right hat, the right shoes. I wear Toms all the time. It's the exact same thing as Steve wearing his flip-flops with socks. We all do things over and over and over again. We all come to this place and assume that it's more than just dirt and rocks and mud piled up so that we have a place to be every Sunday. And Jesus says, you come to me. Step one is come. Just come. Come to me. Step two is all those burdens that you carry, put them down. Put them down. I know that you really like some of the songs in here. You'd be surprised at how much louder you sang Solid Rock than you did all the other songs this morning. And I love that song. That was the song that my gramp said, you have to preach this one and sing this one at my funeral. But there are things that we hold on to. Well, I like this version of the Bible because it doesn't have those weird old English talk in there. So, Jesus, I know that you say, come to me and lay the burdens down, but can I keep some of these things? That's not saying they're bad things. But how much can you hold? How much from this table could I pile on your back before Jesus says, and where am I going to put my yoke that's light? Where are you going to bear my burden that is easy? When all you want to do is continually pick up the rules and the struggle and put on the face that leaves transparency back at home laying on its pillow because you don't show the rest of the world that ever. Jesus says, come because he longs for you to come. He says, lay down your burdens because he knows they're heavy and you can't carry them yourself, even though you're going to try. And he says, pick up mine because mine is far lighter and far easier than the world will ever give you. And in that place, you'll find peace. You'll find rest for your souls. And as counterintuitive as it is, eventually, you'll begin to believe it. And you won't say, and we don't even touch it, because that's a rule you'll never follow. You'll begin to say, all of this is mine, and God keeps some for himself. At the beginning of the series, we said, we will give you practical things each week that will help hone this out. Last week's practicality was begin to find rhythms and reorient your life into God's work. Within you, within the church, within the people around you. This week is begins, most things begin this way, but begins with prayer. And not fancy prayer, not something that is archaic, not something that has a cool acronym that you can work in, but simply a prayer that acknowledges, God, right now I feel grumpy. God, right now I feel anxious. God, right now I'm so mad at that person at work. God, right now I am so frustrated with the other kids in my group that we're trying to get this project done and they're not helping. God, I am so... And just be honest. You will never, ever, ever hurt his feelings or say something that he doesn't know about you already. When you begin with where you're really at, turn that over and say, God, yours. I am a grumpy man sometimes. God, yours. And begin to realize, as far as the east is from the west, you're mine. As far as the east is from the west, you are not the one that has to put on leaves. As far as the east is from the west, you do not have to hide in the bushes. As far as the east is from the west, you do not have to think that you're not worthy anymore. My yoke is easy and my burden is light, but you have to be able to come. You have to begin with saying, God, here I am. And I know it's flawed. And I know I'm foolish sometimes. but do a work. And I will gladly bear whatever burden you have, knowing that that's not always easy. Last week I shared real briefly about a story with my gramps and how he told me about prayer, my life and stuff. And a lot of people afterwards said, "Oh man, we love it when you tell those gramps stories." And those are really hard for me because he had more wisdom than many of us can imagine, and I got to live during those years with him. But what many don't know is my grandfather endured some of the most horrific tragedies of relationship in life that many could never, ever, ever be able to assume he would have had. Just the struggle in his life through his own family was off the charts hard, to the place that those things come out. The boys wrote the song "Refined," that through fire things are refined. Always makes me think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the furnace 7 times hotter. Well, they stood in the furnace and they didn't get burned, but their ropes fell off. Sometimes the worst, most horrific things in lives actually bring you to that place where your bondage is gone and the rest of the world can begin to grow through that. Sometimes we have to be willing to say, "God, I've been carrying these things and I feel like I have to do them. I feel like I need to do them. I feel like these things are the identity I have in Christ, and I need to lay them down and realize the only identity that I have is simply that you called me." Beginning of Ephesians, Paul says, "From the foundations of the world, he knew you and he chose you." If that doesn't scream, "You need not carry any other burden," he chose you. Before there was dirt on the ground, you were his. After he breathed life into Adam and said, "All of this is yours, be with me." So I would encourage you, as the weeks roll on through Lent, begin to reorient your life. Begin to reorient things, or maybe you've been doing this for a while. Begin to say, "God, intentionally use me during this time. Help me to be there for somebody else." And along the way, begin to say, "God, I don't need to carry this anymore." If you look all around you, there's so many things that help you be a better Christian in this world. None of them are necessary except for a relationship with Christ. All of those things can be good, but they're only freeing when you lay them down and he gives them back to you. Let's pray. God, the psalmist tells us that you are good and your love endures forever. Sometimes we need a reminder. I pray that you would remind us and reassure us of those things. I pray that the things that we hold so dear and so tight, the fig leaves that we cover ourselves with daily, weekly, monthly, that we would begin to take them off and give them to you. And that in that you would truly begin to show us who you see, who you know that we truly are, and that we would feel confident in that. Amen.
Sing "The Sun Cannot Compare."
The sun cannot compare to the glory of your love. There is no shadow in your presence. No mortal man would dare to stand before your throne, before the Holy One of heaven. And it's only
by your blood, and it's only through your mercy, Lord, I come. And I bring an offering of worship to my King. No one on earth deserves the praises that I sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due. Oh Lord, I bring an offering to you. We sing that once, and we're going to sing it again as our benediction. Sing, the sun cannot compare. The sun cannot compare to the glory of your love. There is no shadow in your presence. No mortal man would dare to stand before your throne, before the Holy One of heaven. And it's only by your blood, and it's only through your mercy, Lord, I come. And I bring an offering of worship to my King. No one on earth deserves the praises that I sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due. Oh Lord, I bring an offering to you. Oh Lord, I bring an offering to you. Oh Lord, I bring an offering to you.
So it began in the garden with fruit, ends with, then the angel showed me a river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, down the middle of the great street of the city. And on each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit in every month. And the leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. Amen, y'all.
No one on earth deserves the praises that I sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due.